we need as a nation, every young person to be fully maximized to their full potential. Because we've got some issues as a nation coming up, and we're going to need our young people to help solve them. Be it climate change, be it economic, whatever. There's going to be issues we're facing as a nation, and we need our young people energized, educated, supported. And school is the best way of doing that. We need to just make sure our teachers are supported, and an effective pay cut after 3 years is not the way to do it. Not providing professional development, they're supporting it. Not providing the pastoral care for our young people, because we know it's not happening in the community. We know the other parts of our system are stretched, and so it doesn't really feel the values don't match the rhetoric.
Kia ora koutou, and a warm welcome to episode 19 of Locked Out with Craig Renney. By day, I'm the Economist and Director of Policy for the New Zealand Council of Trade Unions. But by night, this podcast looks at the numbers in New Zealand and asks the hard questions so that you can too. We hope that you're enjoying the show and what we do here at Locked Out. If you like the analysis you hear in the show and think others would too, then recommend us to your friends or even your enemies. Also, give us a recommendation wherever you get your podcasts. It really helps get the word out. Here at Locked Out, we're always interested in what our viewers and listeners want to know. If it's making you say, is Nicola Willis really lining up a leadership bid? You can be in no doubt we are too. So get in touch. I'm on X, Blue Sky, and on Substack. We want to hear how we can help you better understand what's really going on and how you can navigate the numbers being thrown around by politicians and experts alike. Now, today, we'll be talking with Chris Abercrombie. Now, he's the president at the Post-Primary Teachers Association, or as I know them, the PPTA. Teachers have been in the press this week for a couple of reasons. Firstly, they've been slandered by the Honourable Judith Collins for earning too much, quoting a figure that she had then later had to retract. This is following the earlier pattern of the Minister of Health, Simeon Brown, who also produced a figure for nurses that bore little resemblance to reality. Ministers either don't know how much people are being paid, don't care, or just make stuff up to suit their needs. I will leave it to you to judge which one of these things is most likely. Secondly, teachers have been on strike this week. Industrial action took place on Wednesday for secondary teachers. Now let's hear from some of those workers, some of those teachers, about why they're on strike.
I'm on strike today because our tamariki deserve kaiako who are valued, resourced and supported, not stretched with the potential of being burnt out. Pastoral care, value for culture and whānau connections take time and heart. If teachers don't have what they need, our students can't get what they deserve.
I'm a teacher and I am striking because I love this job and I want to be in this profession for a really long time, so I need the government to come to the party and support us in conditions and pay and making sure that people want to become teachers in the future.
I'm a teacher and I'm on strike today because the current government offer has nothing to support the pastoral needs of our students.
Now, there have also been increased murmurings around Wellington that ministers are mulling curtailing the right to strike. It's one of the most fundamental principles of industrial relations, not just in New Zealand, but around the world, the ability of workers to take strike action to withdraw their labour in order to be able to use that to talk to an employer to get better terms and conditions. When we see this sort of thing, and I come from a country where we've seen this sort of thing, it's a sure sign that ministers wanting to change the laws, wanting to change the rules, know that industrial actions are working and that they're hurting. So let's talk with Chris now. So thank you very much, Chris, for joining us. Do you want to introduce yourself to our viewers and listeners, for those of you who don't know who you are, although you're now a New Zealand celebrity, given all the media that you've been doing over the past couple of days. But for everybody else, do you want to introduce yourself and tell us who you are?
Absolutely. So I'm Chris Abercrombie. I'm the president of the PPTA, but I often say my normal job is I'm a teacher of history and social studies at a school in Invercargill. So that's what I do when I'm not president.
Fantastic. So first question, Chris, and it may sound like an odd question for this show, but why are you a teacher?
Look, I'm that real classic. Like, I had a great teacher. So Mrs. Kelly was my history teacher at Blue Mountain College. Feels like a million years ago now, but back when I was a teenager, and she was just amazing. She was an amazing teacher, very caring, very patient, and very knowledgeable, and just really, really wanted us to do well. And so helped my love of history, went to university, became I actually originally wanted to be a diplomat. It was at the back of my mind, but I failed international relations with Robert Patman, and I thought maybe that's not for me. And so continued my history degree and then became a teacher, and I haven't looked back since. I absolutely loved it. Just, Mrs. Kelly. It was a weird transition, though, because she was still teaching when I became a teacher. So moving from my teacher to a colleague was a weird combo. We talked all the time. She was in school just down the road from mine, and so one of the schools I worked at. So she was still Mrs. Kelly, though, even though she was a colleague.
Same for me. Mr. Jones, our economics teacher in sixth form at Astley Community High School in Seaton, Delaval. He's no longer there, but I can tell you he was one of the people who inspired me to become an economist. So understand entirely. Now, teachers have been in the news this week. Why are teachers taking industrial action?
Well, the short answer is there's a significant unmet need in secondary education at the moment. Education in general, but specifically secondary education for us. And so there's issues with recruitment and retention of teachers, but also with our young people have such significant issues at the moment that they need met, and it's just not being met in the system. So we unfortunately had to take industrial action to get the government to try and move the needle a little bit on our negotiations. They weren't really, in my opinion, and lots of not coming to the party to try and deal with the real need. And actually, in the last budget, we had an awful lot of resource taken out of secondary. It was put into primary for good reasons, but there was about 60 million of resource taken out of secondary and not replaced or not. And the minister said, next budget's for you guys. And it's like, well, there's need right now, minister. So, this is part of what we're doing. We're fighting for our students, fighting for teachers, and fighting for education.
So what has the government offered teachers? You said, the next budget's for you. What's been put on the table for teachers?
So at the moment, the pay component of it is 1%. So 1% a year for 3 years. So 3% all up over 3 years. And that's about it, to be honest. They didn't address any of our other claims. They've added a little bit here and there with there's this role called principal's nominee in schools, and it's basically an NZQA liaison. So between NZQA and schools, they help manage the assessment. And when that first started, it was quite a sort of data role, but it's just skyrocketed in workload. And so we wanted to get more support for that. So the government did offer some money for that, but only for the term of the settlement. So it would be 3 years, so no more after that. And it was only $2,500 a year for that position. So, and then a whole heap of clawbacks. They wanted to take more time, and when schools are closed for instruction, 10 more days. A weird one about rent subsidy. So there's this very specific clause about if you've got removal costs and you're moving to a high priority staffing school and all these things that you could be eligible for a rent subsidy. But there was something like 19 people that is affected by that clause, and they wanted to make it harder. And it's like, what are you trying to do here? So, unfortunately, it was a lot of nothing really. And the headline was 1% a year for 3 years.
Well, with that laser focus on the cost of living, as claimed at the last election, we've got some charts here to help the public sort of understand and help the viewers and listeners understand what's really, what's the consequence of that 1% pay increase. And if we go to the first slide, what we can see for people who are listening but not viewing is there are 3 bar charts here. The first one, which is in blue, shows the average 1% increase for the average teacher, the average pay of the average teacher in New Zealand. And what that represents is about $1,000 a year. Now, if we look at how much is needed just for inflation, so this is just the inflation forecast from the Reserve Bank. It was updated a couple of days ago. We can show you, when we chuck that into the charts, there's $2,500 needed just for the first year alone. And then there's more than $2,000 in each of the following years. So it's less than half of inflation. In fact, there's more than about $4,500 across the forecast period just missing. And so when we roll that forward, if we click to the next slide, what we can see is that the annual real terms pay cut by the end of the forecast period, by the end of 2027, which is the end of the period, you've got a $3,855 real terms pay cut as a consequence of doing the same job on the basis of that 1% increase in pay that's being offered. Now, what does that mean? What does that mean in the real world? If we click to the next chart, just to make life slightly easier for everyone to understand, what that means is by the end of the period, that's a $74.15 a week pay cut for doing the same job on the basis of this particular offer. Now, there aren't many jobs where people go to work and are looking forward to having been paid less in 3 years' time, $74 a week, less in 3 years' time than where they are now. But that's essentially the consequence of what would happen if this pay offer were to be delivered and ratified. And to me, we have a teacher shortage across the country. Many of our teachers are internationally attractive. They're wanted in places like Australia, the UK, the US, Canada. We want to make sure we're keeping skills and talent in New Zealand, and we don't do that by taking away what essentially is around about 4 or 5 times the value of the pay of the tax cut that was offered for teachers at the last election, away from them by the end of the negotiating period. How would you respond to those numbers that are being put in front of you?
Well, the government says, the minister and the prime minister all say they want a world-class, world-leading public education system here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, but they don't seem to want to pay for it. Teachers are the heart of that, the minister will get up and say, we're building all these new classrooms and we're doing all this. And all. That's great, but you haven't got teachers to fill them. Right now, it is not, you cannot rely on a high school student having a subject specialist teacher in front of them. So I say, I'm a history teacher. It'd be like me teaching physics. Now, I could probably do it, but you're not going to be winning any physics prizes in that classroom. That's a significant issue. So if we want to maximize all our young people, we need subject specialists in front of them. And particularly, as you mentioned, internationally, New Zealand teachers are well sought after. Yesterday on the picket line, a teacher came up and said, I'm going to Melbourne at the end of the term. He's getting a 30 grand pay rise just by going to Melbourne. And it's very easy to do that. We can go live there. We can go work there. Our qualifications, our teacher registration are recognised. It's incredibly easy to do. And so it's just that really significant drain on our system. And, there's 450 secondary jobs in the Ed Gazette right now. And that's a ridiculous number for this time of year.
And so I guess the question is also, this isn't just a financial issue as much as we can put dollars and cents around, some of these claims. Can you also talk about some of the non-financial elements, that are really important here and that seem to be being overlooked by the government in many of these conversations?
So there's two key parts to our sort of non-financial part. One is we want a pastoral care allowance. So we know our young people are dealing with incredibly complex issues. We know mental health issues. As our young people are increasing anxiety, other issues. We know also that neurodivergent students aren't getting the support. Students with specific learning needs aren't getting the support. So what we want is more time to support those young people. And so it's also, to be frank, it's just to make teaching and learning easier. So the teacher doesn't have to focus on those things. They can focus on the teaching and learning. So there's other people in the school to support those young people. We want it to be properly resourced so schools are a really welcoming place for these people. And that's going to help attendance. It's going to help all these other things that we know this government is really interested in. And I've said before, for us oldies, it's such a different world. If you're not around teenagers on a daily basis, you don't understand the world they're dealing with. It's the 24-hour, just fast-paced world. I sort of joke, like when I was at school, no one rang up in the landline to go, "Hello, Mrs. Abercrombie, can I please bully your son?" No one wrote a letter to you, and so it's just this nature of young people and the world they live in. It's just so different, and we need to be able to support them so they can be, as I say, the best that they can be, because that's what we need. And one of the other key things is this government is really significant change, curriculum, assessment, And we need to keep, and this is links back to the pay as well, those really experienced teachers in the classroom, because we need them. We need them there to support this change. I've been teaching 20 years. I've only ever taught NCO. And so to be able to go through a transition into something new, I'm going to need those senior staff, more senior than me, to help me, understand those changes and how to manage them. And we want that high quality professional development. We know the best professional development is teacher led for teachers. And so we wanted to have a PLD fund that was run by teachers for teachers. We had that in the last settlement, and it's been incredibly successful. Meets the government's goals of high qualified, highly trained, delivering new curriculum, delivering new assessment. But unfortunately, the government isn't coming to the party on those issues.
And that PLD, the Professional and Learning Development Fund, that's really important, because, as you said, teaching isn't the same as it was 20, 30 years ago. It's not blackboard and chalk. No. You're using multimedia, but also I think people forget, you've got, on a daily basis, particularly secondary teachers, you've got 30, 15, teenagers in front of you. There aren't that many jobs where you have to entertain 30 teenagers in front of you for 8 hours a day for the amounts of money that are being offered.
Yeah.
For the amounts of money that are being paid. And to offer teachers less than what they're on now, 3 years from now, seems to send a signal about what the government values, and that it's not teachers and their important role in helping to generate, the skills and the talents and the abilities that are going to grow the economy, look after all of us in our old age. And there seems to be some odd values there in being displayed.
Yeah, I mean, we need as a nation every young person to be fully maximised to their full potential, because we've got some issues as a nation coming up, and we're going to need our young people to help solve them. Be it climate change, be it economic, whatever. There's going to be issues we're facing as a nation, and we need our young people energized, educated, supported, and school is the best way of doing that. And to deal with the changes, and you've talked about, it's so different. I mean, I would say 20 years. In my time, the teaching has just changed so much. The expectations on teachers, the technology, we're talking about AI now. Like when I started teaching 20 years ago, that was just not even a concept of it. And now we're regularly talking about how can we use AI in our teaching as a tool to support our teaching and learning and support our young people. But it's rapidly, the change of pace is so rapid now, and we need to just make sure our teachers are supported. And an effective pay cut after 3 years is not the way to do it. Not providing professional development and they're supporting it, not providing the pastoral care for our young people, because we know it's not happening in the community. We know the other parts of our system are stretched, and so it doesn't really feel, the values don't match the rhetoric. And
so what would good look like for teachers here? What do teachers want at the end of the day, at the end of this process?
So I think at the end of the day, they want to feel valued. They want the government to come to the table and say, we value this, we value you, these are the ways we value you. And to put it blunt, pay is part of that, as part of being valued. So something, at least at the minimum, not going backwards, would be a start. But we also need to be looking at the future, because we need to retain our teachers, but we need to recruit them. Overseas recruitment has been vital to our system, absolutely vital. We'd be in a much worse situation if we didn't have overseas recruitment, but it's not a solution. We need to grow our own teachers effectively, be that brand new people, like when I started 22, straight out of university, or second career teachers. And there's a little aside here, second career teachers, if any of you are listening and thinking about becoming a second career teacher, do it. It's amazing. They bring such a depth of knowledge and understanding to the profession, and also they tend to stay because they've made a real conscious decision. If you're 45 and changing career to become a teacher, you're not like, oh, I'm going to pack this in a couple of years. Like, you tend to stay in the profession, and you do amazing things. So that's what we're looking for, is just to feel valued. And the government, again, just putting their money where their mouth is. They say we want world class, but they seem to want it on the cheap.
So New Zealand importing its solutions to its problems is not something I can sort of associate with. But in terms of how might New Zealanders help? How might they sort of register and sort of and help tell the government that they're supporting teachers, that that they support their cause and that they want to see teachers supported well?
So there's lots of ways you can do that. Literally, is to say thank you to your teacher, your kid's teacher. There's one way of excellent doing it. But also contact the minister, contact your local MP, and really to say, look, we want teachers supported. We want education supported. We've also got a pledge, a public education pledge on the Together website. So go along and sign that. Say that you stand for quality public education. Because in New Zealand, unlike a lot of other places, and Australia is a good example, the vast majority of our students go attend public education, their local public school, their local state school, and it's excellent. The average state school in New Zealand is amazing. From Lumsden, all the way to Kaitaia. They're excellent schools with excellent teachers doing excellent work every day. And so just to sign the pledge, get along, support them, and just say thanks to the teacher, thanks to the school. I don't think parents realize how much that actually means to teachers. At my school in Invercargill, we often would get cards from parents, particularly from kids who have left school, asking the family and say thank you so much. They're up on the notice board in the staff room. They mean so much, those little things. And so, just doing those things is so important. But also let Erica Stanford know, let the Prime Minister know how you feel about this, and support your school, support your teachers.
Chris, thank you so much for joining us today and for helping us understand, why teachers are currently taking industrial action, the problems they're facing. We all hope here at Locked Out that you have, the result that you and that teachers are looking for. It's so important. I have a 6-year-old at home, who I'm very much, on Friday I'll be looking after him because there are teachers taking Section 26 notices. We're really, keen to support teachers. If we don't, all those countries around the world that have the best economic outcomes, that are the wealthiest countries in the world, that have the best social outcomes, are also those countries that have the best education outcomes for their children. There's no surer sign of a country going backwards than when its education sector is going backwards. So from us here at Locked Out, we support you thoroughly, and we look forward to hopefully talking with you after you've been successful in your claim with the minister.
I'm always optimistic. I often get accused of being optimistic. So I'm really hopeful that we'll be able to do this, because at the end of the day, we know our community supports us. We know New Zealanders support schools and want a high quality public education. So we just need to let the government know that that's what we want, and that's, I think, what we're going to get.
Thank you, Chris, for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Now, thank you to Chris for helping us out with that and for helping us understand what's really going on with secondary teachers. Now, in this part of the show, we talk about some of the other economic news and some of the other economic numbers that are happening across the country. And the big news this week, of course, was that the Reserve Bank cut the OCR, the official cash rate, by 0.25%. Now, that was widely signaled beforehand, but government saw it as a measure of success that the Reserve Bank is able to cut its interest rate. Now, economists see a country regularly cutting its interest rate as being a country that has a much weaker economy, where unemployment is rising. It's not a sign of success, it's actually a sign of weakness. And one of the things when we see the data, we can see the next quarter, the Reserve Bank is now forecasting formally that we will be heading back in towards negative growth. That employment will be tens of thousands lower than forecast just a few months ago in May. And when we look underneath the hood of the data, we can see a much weaker economy. The economy will be smaller than it was at the election all the way until the end of 2025. Now, bearing in mind we had growth up until the election, we've seen essentially 2 years of an economy stalling, standing still, seeing no real growth. It's a real worry. And of course, what the challenge here is that every time we've had an update, the date when the economy starts to grow again, when employment will start to rise again, keeps being pushed out. We should all be concerned that at the next set of updates, that date might get pushed out a little bit further again. So thank you all for joining us here today on the Locked Out podcast. We hope that you found it both in parts maddening and in parts enlightening. If you've enjoyed the show, please give us a review or a recommendation on YouTube, Spotify, or wherever you download. Locked Out looks forward to talking with you more next week. Don't work too hard. Goodbye.